Okay, welcome back everyone, once again for another SnowRunner truck review. Today, as you can see, I have three vehicles on my screen right now. I have the TUZ 16 Actaeon, the TUZ 108 Warthog, and the Tatra 805. This is going to be a triple review. It's going to be informal like I did last time and a few times before that. So if you hear me say hear any noises, or me grab my controller, clicking, or any type of noise in the background, just know I'm doing this on a one-take basis just because it's a little bit easier for me to do instead of all the post-processing editing work, because I am traveling for work and there's not a lot of time that I have to put in 40 hours of work for every single video that I do. So this is just a little bit of a simple form, and also these vehicles are very similar, so I thought I'd just cram these all three together and give you guys a triple review here. So we're going to start with the pros and cons right now, and up first with the cons, we're going to start with the TUZ Actaeon. So at upside number one, we have it needs upgrades, and I want to just mention that the active suspension for this is available at level 26. It is a driver level unlock. The other race suspension is going to be available on Lake Coved in the Kola Peninsula, and you can actually get both of these. We'll talk a little bit more about these options a little bit later. So let's continue. Downside number two. I think out of all these vehicles on screen, this has the lowest fuel amount at 110 liters and 30 gallons. It does have a roof rack that is 150 points of repairs, 80 liters of fuel, and that equates to 22 gallons. So a very small fuel capacity, pretty much like a lot of scouts have. So that's gonna hinder your ability to cross maps, and the range as well, but it does have pretty good fuel consumption, as we will also learn a little bit later. Okay, moving on, as next on is number three. It is going to be small tires. Now this vehicle is rather small. It is a smaller off-road vehicle. These are all in the off-road class. They're all 4x4s. Relative to its size, these tires are actually pretty large. I can get up to 39 all the way up to 47 if you have the raised suspension option. However, 47 inches still is not 50, and 50 is basically the benchmark that the standard I've kind of set, where a large tire is really around either 49 or 50 inches. So I did have to say they are smaller, just because it's an off-road truck and they're under 40 inches. So yeah, have to keep the standard. So moving on to our next one, it is hard to drive. And as you can see from the video playing right now, at harder speeds, you're going to see that it is hard to keep this thing online at speed. And that's the problem with there's so much power. These vehicles get really strong engines. They're very lightweight, and they're just super hard to drive. They get thrown off balance a lot. You're constantly throwing in turn inputs and trying to keep your truck online, especially in those later areas. So I thought that one should be brought up as well. Number five is going to be weight and wheel spin. No surprise here. You've seen this on a lot of my other reviews. Trucks that do resemble these three right here is going to be the Zix 5368. That is a review I have posted. A lot of these downsides are very similar to that one because they all have similar issues, just because they're 4x4s and the nature of their balance characteristics, their weight, and their power. So weight and wheel spin here for number five. This truck actually is the second lightest vehicle in the off-road class. The Tatra is first as of being the lightest, and the Warthog's heavier than all three of these just by a little bit. So that's not going to get you a lot of grip value, especially with these big buoyant tires. They do spin a lot. There's not a ton of grip value. However, these tires are buoyant, as I said, so you can kind of stay on top of mud. You will still make progress at lower speeds, and all that stuff is pretty much explained on my mud running tips video, so go check that out as well. Moving on to number six is going to be stability conditions and concerns. Okay, so on your screen, I have a snippet from the game files with the truck's characteristics of its weight and where it's set. So there's 2,000 kilograms in the truck, and then there's 1,400 kilograms in the bone cabin. So there's another category which says bone chassis, which you'll see here when we talk about the Warthog. But I believe the bone truck, I believe there's 3 levels of where weight is actually put in these vehicles. I think there might be 4, as we'll see in the Tatra coming up here, but I think it's the bone chassis is definitely going to be in its frame. I think the truck level is, I think it's around mid, maybe just where tire level is. And then I think the cabin is literally set up here on the cabin. So as you can see, there is a good bit of weight in its cabin. So you're going to have that slight chance that you're going to be tipping over, as well as the classification of being an off-road 4x4. You have a short wheelbase. You don't really have a lot of weight spread out to kind of counterbalance you when you're going over obstacles. So that is going to be a huge thing with stability. Now, we're going to talk about these stability conditions. And this is where 2 schools of thought come in. In the first school of thought, let me just change these up here, and then I'll talk a little bit more about this. Switch to the 43-inch tires. Okay, so something to note. To use the active suspension, you need to have the 43-inch tires equipped, not the 47s. You just cannot get them for some reason. I think that's a downside in my opinion. I wish you could. It'd be amazing. But the first school of thought with this, with increasing your balance for these 4x4s, one is having the active suspension on. You take a hit on your tire height, but what you do is you actually keep your active suspension compressed until you need more ground clearance, and then you activate it and you bump up a little bit more for ground clearance to get you through those heavier conditions. That is a school of thought I used to be really bullish on. However, in recent times, I've kind of been playing around and looking at things, and then the next school of thought, which is also really viable, is just directly using the race suspension option. And then I'll get a good view here. And then what you do is, because the 43-inch tire is smaller and the 47-inch tire juts out that much farther, and you can see here's the line where the 43-inch tire is, and there is how much farther the 47-inch tire comes out. So you're gaining that wider gate with a larger tire, so therefore you're going to gain stability. Now, here's the issue. Later we're going to learn about this, the properties of the TUZ Actaeon and its winch and stuff like that, and getting back to its feet. Having bigger tires, you can, when you're flipped over, it's harder to flip just because your tires are just so dang large, and it's kind of going to just pull you along the ground. That just happens sometimes, but I just wanted to mention that. So those are 2 schools of thought. You can use either one. They both, I believe, work. But I would probably choose just the race suspension with the larger tires and just drive safe. I do also use the other setup with the active quite a bit, which is another safe bet. So just want to mention that. Moving on to number 7, it is not well suited for logging. On the screen, you probably already have seen that it can do long logs. Out of these 3 trucks, it's the only one that can do this, and to be quite honest, it does not do it well. Even long logs are it's a single piece of cargo, and it weighs the most out of any piece of cargo in the game, and that all is literally in direct line with its back axles, giving it a lot of weight on wheels. Still, I am hamstrung to lower gears, especially in moderate areas. I feel like I'm just churning up things and digging up stuff. That's why I'm always in low diff lock or low, or just regular to low, just for the simple fact that I'm losing traction, for the simple fact that the truck just doesn't weigh anything. And also, these tires aren't the most grippy, especially for how light the vehicle is. So for some reason, that huge amount of weight on this vehicle is not really giving me the amount of grip that I would want. You could try switching out to like a different tire, an off-road tire, or even a chain tire to just bite in more. I think that would probably help. That is an option that you can use. And then lastly, guys, at the number 8 spot, it's not well suited for heavy cargo, and its performance is it's not like it would be for other off-road trucks, the off-road 6x6s. And you can just see by the frame add-ons, I think I didn't put limited frame add-ons because I feel like all these frame add-ons in here you can use aside from the log carrier. I believe it suits all these add-ons really well. I just don't feel that these trucks are well suited for heavy hauls, and that is the TUZ Actaeon for the downsides, we are going to switch over and talk about the TUZ Warthog here, so let's get into it. Okay, so right here we have the TUZ 108 Warthog, and this is going to be the downsides for the Warthog as well, and then we will move on to the Tatra 805. So coming in at number 1, same thing, it needs upgrades, not necessarily engine upgrades, because the power is pretty much going to be present all the way through all of its upgrades. It's a lighter weight truck, it's not really struggling there. However, you're going to need the actives and race suspension, which are both found in a Mandra. There is no driver level cap, you can just go get those, equip them, and then there you go, you have that, the active and the race suspension option, same as the Actaeon. Number 2 is going to be a small fuel tank. So right now the fuel tank is 200 liters at 53 gallons. Now I know this is a smaller Scout, and if you look at other vehicles like the Azov 5319 that has a 53 gallon 200 liter tank, they are the same size. This is a smaller vehicle and it has a roof rack, yet 53 gallons and 200 liters still, regardless, is still a small tank if we're talking about an off-road class. But in relation to size and what it can do, it actually is a pretty decent sized tank. So also, now we have to mention the repair kit on top, which is 150 repair points. It has 2 spare wheels, which is more than the Actaeon, and it also has 60 liters or 16 gallons on top of its roof rack, so then it just gives you a little bit more range as well. Next, talk about small tires. Mentioned this in the Actaeon as well. These get to 47 inches, the same tire profiles that go from 39 to 43 to 47 with those raised and active suspension upgrades. Number 4, it is going to be hard to drive. Same thing, actually this vehicle here probably is easier to drive than all of them in my opinion. I think it has a little bit longer of a wheelbase. The weight seems more in the back of the vehicle opposed to its actual front, and we'll learn about that here in a little bit. But I think this one still is pretty squirrely. As 4x4s, that's just the nature of how they are. The short wheelbase, I think the only 4x4 that drives really well in the off-road class is the Crocodile, and you can check out that review on my YouTube. I basically had the throttle just pegged to the floor the whole time in that review on those clips that I'm showing, so and it handled things really well. Okay, moving on to downside number 5 is weight and wheel spin. No surprises here. You're going to have wheel spin. These large tires, they don't bite in as much as others. They're very buoyant, as I've said. The TUZ 108 Warthog is the number 3 lightest truck in its class at 4.4 tons. It does outweigh all these here on screen. It's a little bit lighter than the Crocodile and the Azov 5368, so just keep that in mind. So you're not going to have those amazing grip quality features that some other trucks in the off-road class have, so it is going to struggle in that way. Number 6 is stability conditions and concerns. Okay, so on your screen you're going to see here that I'm going to have the weight characteristics up for you. This is something new I've been doing. First off, I just want to mention that it does have a significant amount of weight in its chassis, and what I mean by its chassis is down here. Let me actually go in here so I can scroll around. I can do this. Let's go like this. There we go. So most of the weight is actually in its frame, which is down here in its chassis as well. So having that weight really low is a good thing for balance, of course. Like I've always said, having low weights actually doesn't allow you to tip over very easy. Now we do have some weight up here in its cabin that is 1,265 kilograms, which is gonna kind of offset the balance of it, its balance characteristics. However, I do think this vehicle does, I don't want to say good because it's not good, because it can flip over pretty easily, but I do think it's not as bad as the Actaeon, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Number 7, it's not meant for low saddle hauling. So something with the low saddle is the only trailer that you can use with this low saddle at all is actually going to be the gooseneck. And the gooseneck is not a good trailer at all. Its clearances are super low. It kind of drags in a lot of areas, And this poses a big issue for the Warthog, because the Warthog is so light in its front end that whenever that trailer gets stuck, the Warthog's front end just kicks straight up in the air, and you'll still have spinning here. There's really no power issues, and we'll talk about power later. That's an amazing thing about this vehicle. But what happens is with the other trailers, like the sideboard semi or even the flatbed semi trailer, you really cannot turn. There is trailer contact right up against the back of your cab. And this was really sad. I kind of knew this whenever I was doing my tier list. Whenever I looked at this vehicle and saw that it had a low saddle, I immediately said to myself, this is going to have trailer contact. So I just had to figure it out for myself. But the only trailer that you can use, like I said, is the gooseneck. So it's kind of sad. And you can't use the crane in conjunction with the saddle as well. So other than that, it does have the smaller frames. Not too bad. Okay, moving on. There is better alternatives. Now, I do think that there definitely is better alternatives for what this vehicle actually can do. And a better alternative, in my opinion, would probably be another 4x4. If we're talking about 4x4s, I would definitely use the Crocodile over pretty much any of these vehicles, just for the sheer fact that the Crocodile is a very dependable platform that is easy to drive. I do use all of these vehicles in my hardcore playthrough. I'm still using them, and I will continue to. But I do think that if you want something that is a 4x4, a smaller support role, that's easier to drive, you don't have to worry about it, you're probably going to want to use the Croc. So that is all of the downsides for the TUZ 108 Warthog. Now we are going to step over and talk about the Tatra 805 licensed vehicle. So let's jump into this. Okay, so moving on here to the Tatra 805 cons. Basically, to start out the list, we're going to quickly breeze through these because, as you can see, they have a lot of downsides that are shared between these trucks. Like I've said multiple times in this review, and I probably will state again, that they are very similar, and they do have their own little differences as well within each list of cons and pros. But we're just going to quickly breeze through the cons list here. Starting at number 1, it's going to be small fuel tank. It has a 190 liter fuel tank, and this is equated to 51 gallons. Now, because this vehicle is relatively small, it is one of the smallest trucks in the off-road class. Having 51 gallons realistically isn't that bad, but overall it is in the off-road class, so I have to compare it against the class it's in. So compared to the class it's in, it is a small fuel tank, but overall we'll know that it actually has good range when we talk about its pros. But moving on, we actually have a roof rack here that gives you 200 repair points, 80 liters of fuel, and that equates to 22 gallons. So you're going to have some range to mitigate the small fuel tank overall. Next, we have small tires. The Tatra has 37-inch AMHS tires. They are those balloon tires, however, they are relatively small, and whenever you go into those thick patches of mud, sometimes you're slowed down to a very, very slow crawl, and sometimes you just outright get stuck. So I believe that they might be a little bit too small. It would be nice to see kind of a raised suspension or even a stiffer suspension to get this thing up off the ground, especially with this add-on we have right here. You can see the suspension seems a lot better once it has lighter add-ons as well. However, the tires are just small. There's a lot of Scouts that have larger tires than it. It's the smallest tires for its class in the off-road truck class, so it definitely had to go on this list. Number 3 is just hard to drive. If anyone has driven this truck at speed, or even in some situations where you're on ice, it is pretty darn tough to keep online. Any quick movements just take this thing from left to right, and it's just very exaggerated sharp turns, understeer, oversteer. It's just tough to keep this truck on a path at speed. So that's why I do recommend the slower gearboxes, because I don't feel that this is a good truck for the high range gearbox, because as well as its off-road prowess of getting stuck and needing those low gears to have its switchable all-wheel drive and diff lock engage most of the time. So that's why I think the the slower gearbox is just better to mitigate downside number 3. At downside number 4, it's going to be weight and wheel spin. In short, the Tatra 805 is the lightest truck in its class. The Actaeon and the Warthog outweigh it. Every 4x4 off-road class truck outweighs it. It does weigh less than some Scouts as well. So you're going to run into that wheel spin, the grip, and that's kind of why I do recommend the off-road gearbox, like I said in downside number 3. I think it's just going to mitigate a bunch of things with slowing yourself down, stopping your wheel spin, and because you don't have enough weight to just give you that traction. Number 5 is going to be mediocre stability and lacking durability. So we'll talk about durability first. One, this engine here, the LAZ 6 TA240, is the same engine that's in the KRS Bandit. If you watch my KRS Bandit video, you know that I labeled it the glass cannon. This is kind of like a mini glass cannon because the actual durability value is like 120. So it's almost like Scout levels of durability, and mostly all these 4x4s have lacking durability. The only one that has relatively decent durability in its engine is going to be the Warthog. I think it's like 200. So other than that, this is relatively lacking in durability. I didn't expect it to be very durable just because it's a smaller truck, but I had to put that in there. Next, we'll talk about its mediocre stability. Now, here's the thing. I do believe this vehicle is not a stable vehicle, but I don't think it's a relatively tippy vehicle. It would probably be placed somewhere in the middle, around average to slightly below average, because, well, it is a 4x4. Their balance properties aren't the best just because they're so compact and their weight's in necessarily a very short span of frame length. So there's not much room to compensate whenever you're going over those bumps and stuff like that. And we'll learn about the ways that the Tatra actually compensates later. We'll talk about the backbone. But as it stands now, I think its stability is okay. I think it can be manageable at most, and that's kind of where I'll leave it. And now I'm going to briefly show you a little snippet from the game files and show you where the truck is actually weighted in. So first, there's 1,200 kilograms in the truck, and I believe, like I said, I think that's mid-level. And then you have the bone cabin, which is up here, of course, the cabin, and there's 1,000 kilos up here, and I think that probably contributes to its tippiness there, because weight that's higher in vertical center of gravity, of course, is going to cause you to tip over. Kind of like the old ANK, where it had a lot of weight in its upper cabin and it would just roll at will. And I think there has been a rebalance to fix that. I haven't explored that yet, but that's what I believe happened. Next and lastly, this is a value I have not seen yet. This is 500 kilograms in the bone driver stopper model frame, and I believe this is actually weight in this actual Tatra backbone. I cannot confirm or deny that. This is just my speculation of where I think this weight is, but if it is down here, I think that's really, really good for balance. So I will stop there and we will move on so I don't take too much time. Number 6, it doesn't have many add-ons. For this one, I think I have to put it on the downsides list because, well, there's not many things you can do with it. It kind of seems like a Scout because it only can carry, one slot cargo, has a maintenance frame that's specialized for this vehicle. A roof rack, of course, you can always keep on, and the small fuel carrier. However, I do think this is kind of a blessing because later we'll talk about that a little bit, but if it did have things like that, I would say comparable to the Zix, how the Zix has all these very large add-ons, they just don't suit this vehicle, and it's very unstable whenever you set off and drive with this. And if you have used these big add-ons with the Zix and these 4x4s, this is an example of why some of these, or this vehicle, should not have these add-ons. It's not well suited for it. So, but anyways, I just felt that, not having add-ons, it has to go on the downsides list. Anyways, moving on to number 7. It's not for hauling cargo, and this is just something I added in here because I didn't feel like the Tatra 805 is a vehicle you should be hauling cargo with. I believe it can haul one piece of cargo relatively easily because, well, it's just one piece of cargo. It's not too much weight. It's not going to be a bunch of stuff for you to lug around. However, I do not feel that you should be pulling trailers with this at all, because it is a lighter weight vehicle. Too much wheel spin, just not enough traction to pull it. And pulling trailers, there is resistance whenever you're pulling trailers, so you just don't have it with this vehicle. So I just feel like this vehicle is probably just meant for, you know, single hauls, and then a support vehicle and a scout kind of. Moving on to number 8, which is our last downside. It is a paid DLC. I don't know if you have to buy a certain season to get the Tatra pack unlocked. I'm not sure if that's up, that's completed, or that's still alive. Other than that, you either would have to buy that season to unlock the Tatra pack, or buy the Tatra pack outright, which will give you the T813 and the T805. But regardless, you have to pay for it, and if you have to pay for it, I put it as a downside. So anyways, we are going to now jump over back to the TUZ 16 and start talking about the pros now. So let's get started. Okay, finally we're on to the pros here, the good news. So we're going to start out here with the TUZ 16 Actaeon, like I said, and start coming strong at number 1. As usual, it's going to be power and the switchable features. Now, this engine here, the LAZ TA240, it's found in the flooded foothills. It's shared with the KRS Bandit. Pretty good, powerful engine. I believe it is number 11. It'll actually be on your screen right now. I don't have my notes sitting in front of me to actually confirm that, but it is a powerful engine, especially because every engine in here actually gives it S+ power, so you're never going to be really starving for power, because the vehicle has so much available power because its weight is so small. And then also it has the switchable features, and if you've heard me talk about the switchable features, I do like them a lot. Just because it allows you to have more of a customized gameplay where you have more control of your truck, and that's always a good thing. However, of course, if they were always on, we know that it would have better performance outside of low gears, which would be cool, but also it's not necessarily realistic. So that is that. We're going to move on here to number 2, and that's upgraded tires. I just want to mention that this vehicle, when it first dropped in Season 1, this vehicle and the TUZ Warthog, they did not have these big AMHS tires. And this is something that has been added. And as you can see, they only really topped out at the UODs, or the chained if you prefer the chained. But however, you can just see how they line up basically with the frame of the truck or the cab of the truck, and it doesn't necessarily give you any lateral stability. And then when you put back on these tires, these are not the largest ones. The largest ones do stick out further. So we talked about that earlier, but they do give you some lateral stability, and they give you buoyancy as well to get through harsher areas just at lower speeds, which is super helpful. I'm so glad that they actually added these into the game. Next, we're going to talk about fuel consumption. Now, as you know, it does have a relatively small fuel tank, one of the smallest. It's basically scout level fuel tank. It does have a roof rack with some supplies on top, as we've mentioned. However, it does get pretty good fuel consumption even with loads. The heaviest load you're ever going to carry is logs, and I don't recommend you do carry logs. But yeah, I think you're going to have pretty good range and pretty good consumption with this, because it's not necessarily going to be stressed all the time, because it has so much available power to weight overhead. As you can see throughout all these engines, it just stays at S+, so it's never really going to be starved or put into a stressed situation that much, so you'll have good fuel consumption there. Number 4, and I think this actually is the best upside of all these trucks here, aside from a few other things, I think it is the autonomous winch here at number 4. This is the only vehicle that gets the autonomous winch outside of the scout class, so it kind of makes this a crossover scout. I really wish there would be a heavy scout class that they would make, and I think all these 4x4s should actually go into that class to be and given autonomous winches, which it would kind of make the game a little bit different in that aspect. Maybe not. I don't know how the balancing issues would go with these guys getting autonomous winches, and I think it would probably power creep the scouts too much. But however, I think this does, because it is an off-road truck with an autonomous winch. But this is really amazing because yeah, you get a second chance, so there's not really much to say. It's quite incredible. But anyways, moving on to number 5, it's a good support and scout replacement vehicle. Like I've said, it kind of power creeps the scouts here. I don't think it replaces them. I do think there's some scouts that do perform definitely better than the TUZ Actaeon. However, it just does multiple things. It can do some things that the off-road class can do, as well as having the autonomous winch, so it's a good scout replacement because you do get that second chance if you have something to winch to when you turn over. And also it is a good support vehicle because of all of its add-ons, the maintenance frame, the carrier. You can load with it as well. I probably wouldn't use that, but anyways, I think it is a good support vehicle, a smaller support vehicle that you can use if you don't want to necessarily go grab another big truck to do those jobs. Moving on, finally, to our number 6 upside. It is free. If you have the Season 1 DLC, this vehicle is found on the Kola Peninsula on Lake Cove. It's at the northeast side of the map. All you have to do, I think it's in some type of bog area, like a little ravine. You just roll up to it, you discover it, you can recover it to your garage, or pull it back if you're on hard mode, so you're not paying those recovery fees. So there you have it. It is a free truck, but I mean, you do have to pay for the season, so in essence you still kind of are paying for it. So anyways, it is a free truck. You get it for free and then you can have it. So that is the upsides for the TUZ 16 Actaeon. We're now going to step over to the TUZ 108 Warthog and talk about its pros now. So here we go. Okay, so moving on here to the TUZ 108 Warthog for its pros. You're going to see a lot of the same ones here, but there is a little bit of differences here between both of these two trucks. Now we're going to start off with number 1, standard power and the switchable features, but there is a little bit of a difference when it comes to power. The Warthog has the same engine as both the Azov 64131 and the Azov 5319. This has a 210,000 torque rating. It is a super strong engine for this vehicle, considering that this truck here's max engine is 185,000. So you have so much more power to weight here. Even with all these options, they're going to be viable because, well, you're not really that heavy. So, and then also in combination, you have the switchable features, and as I mentioned, just gives you customizable options to tailor it to your playing style. I think for these lighter vehicles, being able to switch these on and off and having diff lock and a slower gearbox, I think it's going to be really advantageous for that as well. But yeah, having that engine power is really crazy. I didn't know why it got this engine, but I'm definitely not complaining about it. So anyways, moving on here. So I talked about the upgraded tires for number 2, upside number 2 with the TUZ Actaeon here. Same thing with the Warthog. It didn't have these large balloon tires when it first dropped, and then it was given these tires later, and I believe it has helped its off-road ability in a very positive way. So I'm really thankful for that. So I just want to briefly touch on that as well. Number 3, I believe it's a good small support vehicle. I don't think it should be a scout replacement, because I just don't feel the Warthog it doesn't have the autonomous winch to be able to save itself if it does tip over, because then if it tips itself over, it just becomes another truck that needs rescued. And that's why I think the Actaeon probably supports the scout role a little bit better than this truck, but I do think it is a good support vehicle. It does have these maintenance frames, can do the small sideboard bed, and it has that small fuel carrier. But as you should note, this small fuel carrier is actually cut short. The actual other one is 238 gallons. I'm not sure what that equates to in liters, but this one's cut short because the cab is so big. So that just keep that in mind whenever you're choosing a truck to go out to refuel and support other vehicles. But overall, I think it's a good vehicle, a good support vehicle. I still use it on hardcore mode. And finally, actually at number 4, it's going to be range. Because this vehicle does have this large engine, we know the 5319 does burn a lot of fuel. However, the 64131 does not burn a lot of fuel, and I believe I talked about the gearbox options being a contributing factor. Now for this truck, I think another factor is the engine being simply stressed to where it's actually elevating its burn values. So with this vehicle, there is so much power to weight excess that the actual engine is never going to truly be stressed out, because it's not necessarily going to be pulling anything that's heavy pretty much ever, unless you're hauling, you know, something on a semi-trailer or something like that. And I don't think this vehicle is necessarily should be used as that as well, and I talked about that already. But overall, I think you'll get pretty good range out of this, especially with this this setup you have here. So I think you'll be able to get across the map and support other vehicles, as we said in upside number 3. And finally, at upside number 5, it is free. This vehicle is found on the next map in the Kola Peninsula, and that is Imandra. And on Imandra, there is I believe it's like an airport where you go pick up a trailer for the final Stars in the Sky mission. And this is where this vehicle is sitting there. All you have to do is roll up to it, repair it, send it back to your garage, or if you're in hardcore mode, just pull it back if you don't want to pay the fee for recovering it. So it is free, however you have to pay for Season 1, so it isn't free. It is free in-game, so yeah, I did feel that was an upside. Okay, now since we covered all those upsides for the TUZ 108 Warthog, we're now going to finally step over to the Tatra 805 licensed vehicle and start off with these pros. Here we go. Okay, to briefly go through the pros for the Tatra 805, I have about 6 in my list right now. At upside number 1, the standard, of course, power and the switchable features. It has the LAS 6 TA240 engine. Like I said before, it's found in the flooded foothills at the south part of the map. This is shared with other notable vehicles like the KRS Bandit. Very strong engine. However, you don't necessarily need it, because all these options are definitely going to be viable, and some of them get better fuel consumption, which fuel is really necessarily not a huge deal with these smaller trucks, like I've said. And also you have the switchable features. It definitely needs to be in low gears a lot of times. Throughout this video, you'll probably see I'm crawling along through mud just because I just can't stay outside of low gear without the differential locking. I just need it. It's that powerful of an asset. And the Tatra definitely needs to have the off-road gearbox, in my opinion. That's just my thoughts, or a slower gearbox like a fine tune as well. But I think the off-road gearbox is my go-to. I think, however, that a diff lock always on with the Tatra would be quite amazing. I think just because of these vehicles having their license and their off-road prowess in real life, I've seen some things they can do. I kind of wish it did have the always-on differential locking, which is the dream setup. But we will just continue there and go to upside number 2, and that is the Tatra backbone. So we kind of mentioned that its weight might be in that Tatra backbone at 500 kilograms, but the Tatra backbone, I have explained this in multiple videos with other Tatra trucks, so if you want any more detail on those, please go check those out. But anyways, these are single half axles that are swinging. They act independently when hitting terrain, and they're all connected to a central backbone, which is this casing in the middle. That's where the power is distributed to each tire, and it basically just helps stability in going over terrain. And I think this helps with balance in a very amazing way, especially for a 4x4 that has a very short wheelbase. I mentioned before how as soon as you jar them off balance, they really don't have anything to counterbalance. So having the backbone helps you absorb different types of terrain shock that hit your vehicle when you're just going through the elements. So really amazing thing that the Tatras bring to the table. Number 3 is the balloon tires. Yes, they are small. They are literally the smallest balloon tire that we have right now in the game. Scouts do have larger tires than this vehicle here. Sadly, that is true, but still they are balloon tires. They do have some buoyancy. I don't think you're going to get through like the devil's mud out there with these smaller 37-inch tires, but still I think it is a good option for stability as well, because, well, like I said, 4x4s don't have that great of stability, so I think it's definitely needed. You also can use the chained as well. You might get a little bit better bite in snowy areas, but that's just up to you. That's driver choice there. Okay, Moving on to number 4, it is going to be consumption in range, and like I said, this has so much power to weight overhead, and like I mentioned before in the last 2 pros on the TUZ 16 Actaeon and the 108 Warthog, there's so much power to weight overhead that the vehicle's never going to truly be stressed out to where it's burning a ton of fuel. It actually burns pretty much scout levels of fuel, and it has a moderately decent capacity as well. And you also have your roof rack, and you can put a fuel carrier on the back, giving you amazing range. And that's where I think the consumption range is really good for this vehicle as a support role as well, because you definitely want a vehicle that's a support role that's pretty efficient as well, because you don't want to be burning up all your fuel before you get there to support other vehicles, right? So now moving on to number 5, I think it's well suited for its add-ons. Now, I did say before that a downside was it doesn't have many add-ons. However, I don't think it could support many other add-ons because it's just so small. I think the extent of it is right here with the sideboard bed. I think the 1-slot sideboard bed is pretty much the extent of what I think this vehicle should be used for. If you could fit a crane on there, that might be good. I think that's just wishful thinking, because I think that would add too much weight higher up, increasing the vertical center of gravity, and then that causes you to tip over more. So I think Sabre was pretty good about giving it the right add-ons for its frame and its size. So I think that's definitely an upside. And they didn't overstep with kind of like vehicles of the Zix 5368, which definitely has more add-ons like I've showed you. This one has add-ons that can actually support, so I thought that was good. Number 6, it's a good support vehicle and a scout vehicle. So I think it's a better support vehicle than it could ever be a scout vehicle, and I've mentioned this previously as well. You're gonna hear me repeat this. It doesn't have the autonomous winch, which would give it the ability to save itself. However, it doesn't, so if you flip it, you have to come rescue it or recover it and start again. So with that being said, it is a decent scout that could have more range than a scout, because it has has all these add-ons like a fuel carrier. Normally scouts don't have fuel carriers on them, so you could use this setup as a scouting role if you are safe. If you're a safe driver, you probably can get away with using this as a scout role, but I think it's better suited as a good support truck that you can just use. So anyways, that is all the pros and cons for the TUZ 16 Actaeon, TUZ 108 Warthog, and the Tatra 805. We are now going to get over to the conclusion, and I'm going to give you my NProv rating. So here we go. So in conclusion, guys, I just want to say that all 3 of these vehicles, I think they're going to be used in different ways. They are very similar. They do have their own little quirks and their own little pros and cons as well, but overall, these 3 vehicles, even this and also the Zix 5368, they're very similar in a lot of ways, and they are different as well. I'm going to quickly go through this as a quick conclusion and just give you a brief overview of what we talked about, and maybe just tell you which one I would give the nod. Before I do that, I just want to say I just switched microphones for this segment, because my last microphone was popping and clicking there in the last segment, and it actually died. So this is a new microphone. Hopefully it's working better and it's a little bit more clear. Anyways, let's continue. Here we go. The TUZ Actaeon, I believe, has one of the best assets of all of these vehicles. Any 4x4 vehicle, it has the best asset, and that is the autonomous winch. And I kind of spoke about this already, having that second chance. I don't think this is actually, I do think this is probably one of the most powerful things that you can have in the game, especially because it's SnowRunner. You're gonna flip, you're gonna tip your truck over, and in scenarios like hardcore, if you're playing hard mode, if you tip a truck over that doesn't have an autonomous winch, you have to come get it. Getting it is resources, as well as providing money and gas and just time. So this actually negates that if you can get a good flip and find a place to winch to. So that's the TUZ Actaeon. Very good truck. The TUZ Warthog, I just want to mention a few things here. All the weight, or more of the weight, is balanced in the back of the vehicle. So if you drown this thing, it's actually going to float. The cab is going to float, so the nose will come straight up in the air. And it's also evident when it's pulling cargo and it gets kind of hung up. If you use any type of semi-trailer and it gets snagged on something, usually, or just slows down, the front end of this thing just jumps right in the air, and you lose steering capability. That's a bad thing, but also it can be a good thing. And a good way it can be good is whenever you're going over a bump. I've talked about this here when I was talking about the Tatra Phoenix or the Tatra 805. But when you're going over bumps, if you have weights in your front end, let's say most of your weight is in your front end, well, when you jar this part of your vehicle off balance, there's nothing counterbalancing you from just rolling over. Okay, so this weight being in the back, whenever this hits a bump and comes up, that weight is not necessarily throwing the vehicle over immediately. There's still something back in the back resisting that that terrain shock, I guess, or just counterbalancing the when it goes over some type of terrain. So there's been times as well I thought I should have flipped over, and I think it being weighted in the back has been beneficial in some parts. I can't say in all parts, but it has been in some parts. Some downsides are, well, it has a shorter fuel tank here. It can't use the low saddle, which is really sad. I was really sad when I saw that, or when it actually had the actual collisions with those trailers and stuff like that. I thought it would be pretty cool to do. However, I'm not that fazed by it. I think I can use other trucks as well. I think it's definitely suited for the other add-ons though. Anyways, moving on to the Tatra 805. I think the Tatra 805 is a good vehicle. I don't think it's a Scout replacement. I think if it was going to be a Scout replacement, it would have an autonomous winch. It's pretty much the size of a Scout. It's really should be in a class of its own, almost like a heavy Scout class. And given the autonomous winch and possibly the always on features, or at least differential locking always on, I would like to see that, but it does struggle in some very thick areas. I don't say it's tippy, I don't say it's actually stable. It's more around I would say the average to maybe below average stability, just because the weight characteristics. And I also wanted to say one more thing about this. The weight characteristics, that third line, the driver little shaft thing that we mentioned that had 500 kilograms, I believe that could be the Tatra backbone weight that is encoded in the vehicle. So I believe that 500 kilos could be down here. I can't be for certain, but that's just my speculation. So anyways, these vehicles are pretty good. I do like them. However, 4x4s in nature are just tippy. They're squirrely to drive at fast paces, and they don't take up a huge part of the game. They're kind of like Scout vehicles, but they can do a little bit more. So it's kind of in that area. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope this gave you a fresh new perspective. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you can. It would really help me out. So, and until next time, guys, have a wonderful day. God bless, and stay upright.